Good afternoon. It's Ashley of Asheric Meditation back. Bodhi is here with us also, my little cockapoo. Say hello, little doggy. Hello, and we're back to do some more reading of Good Citizens. I believe we're on part 4 of 9, so we've got a ways to go yet for this book. And we're going to jump in as soon as this little guy stops clawing for my arm. Oh. Bodhi. Yeah, you can come up. Come up here. Oh, come on, jump. There we go. Okay. He'll sit right here for a few minutes while we get started. So thank you again. If anyone's coming back from the last time I read, we're on part 4 of Good Citizens by Thich, Naht, Hanh. If you want to catch the first 3 parts of this book, you can find my YouTube, Asheric Meditation. My handle up here that you can see, it's just Asheric Meditation on YouTube. You can search me there, or you can, I believe I've got links in my bio now, so you can also find it through that way. All right, section 4, the second noble truth, the ignoble path. Once we have called our suffering by its true name, we need to look deeply to see where this suffering comes from. If we accept the first truth of suffering, we have to accept that there are causes for this suffering, because everything has its roots. When we look deeply into the roots and examine them, we have already begun to transform our suffering. How has the ill-being come to be? We don't need to find the answers by trusting that Buddha or God created suffering for mysterious reasons. We only need to use our clear minds and our calm hearts to look deeply and to see the causes. There are ways of perceiving and ways of living that lead to ill-being. This is the second noble truth, the causes of suffering. The second noble truth can be conceived of as a path, but it's not a path that leads to happiness and well-being. It's a path leading to suffering. Many of us have taken the path that leads to anger, discrimination, violence, ignorance, and despair. The path of suffering is the ignoble path of wrong view, wrong thinking, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong diligence, wrong mindfulness, and wrong concentration. If we understand how and why we've been walking the path of suffering, then we can see its opposite. The Noble Eightfold Path and the path to well-being will reveal itself. Why are we in the midst of an economic crisis? Again, this is written years ago, but it's going to sound true to today's world. Think of everything that's going on in our global society and just extrapolate these for today's world. These words for today's world. All right. These words just remind me of that. All right. Why are we in the midst of an economic crisis? Why is there so much pollution, terrorism, and climate change? When we ask these questions, we need to take the time and space to really look deeply to try to find the answer. No matter what our religious backgrounds, we have to acknowledge the true suffering of our world and sit down together to try to find the causes. Some Buddhist teachers say that the desire is the basic cause of ill-being. It's not true. Desire is only one tiny part of the wrong path. The real block of our suffering is caused by wrong view, which in turn leads to wrong thinking, and so on. The suffering of the world and our own suffering have been created by wrong views and wrong thinking. When we begin to see that we are creating our own suffering, we can begin to see how we can transform it. If we want to transform the situation of global warming, for example, we need to understand what is producing the carbon monoxide that is heating the Earth's surface. Coal-burning power plants are the largest source of carbon dioxide pollution in the United States. They produce 2.5 billion tons every year. Automobiles, the second largest source, create nearly 1.5 billion tons of CO2 annually. We also have to look at what we consume every day that contributes to the climate change. We drive cars, use electricity and gas, and destroy the forests in order to raise livestock to eat. All of these things contribute to global climate change. If we drive a lot, if we keep the lights on, if we eat too much meat, then the causes of our suffering accumulate. If we look deeply into the second noble truth, we not only see the ways we cause our own suffering, we see how to transform it. If we take care of ourselves and are less stressed, we cause less personal suffering, less irritation and conflict with our loved ones. And we're more likely to keep ourselves healthy. If we don't eat meat, farmers won't raise livestock to kill for our use. If we don't drive, we'll produce a lot less carbon monoxide. If we insist that large companies also stop polluting, we're actively doing something to create less suffering and more peace in the world. The 4 nutriments, our consumption causes our suffering and our joy. What we consume is the cause of a lot of our suffering. The Buddha spoke of 4 nutriments, the 4 kinds of foods that can bring us either well-being or ill-being. Happiness and suffering can be understood in terms of food, the nutriments we consume every day. The Buddha said, if you look deeply into the nature of what has come to be, namely your ill-being, your depression, and identify the source of the nutrients that have created it, you are already on the path of transformation and healing. The first nutriment, edible food. The first kind of nutriment is edible food, what we actually put into our mouths, chew, swallow, or drink. If it is good food, healthy food, then there will be no problem. There will be well-being. If it is not appropriate, then we can become ill. So before eating, we should look at the dishes on the table and breathe in and out to see whether that kind of food is good for us or not. We can remove the dish that we think is not good for our health. Mindful consumption of edible food also affects how we shop. Mindfully shopping at the grocery store or marketplace means you know what to buy and what not to buy. We can choose healthy foods. Mindful consumption affects the way we cook. When we cook, we have another occasion to practice mindfulness. When we sit around the table to eat, we have another opportunity to be aware. We can eat in such a way that we reduce the suffering of living beings. Merely by the way we eat, we can help preserve our planet. If we know how to eat properly and in such a way that can help us cultivate compassion, we know that without compassion we can't be happy because we can't relate to other living beings. The Buddha's example, the sun's flesh. To illustrate the first nutriment, edible food, the Buddha told the story of a young family who had to cross the desert. Halfway across, they ran out of food. After much thinking and debating, the parents decided to kill the little boy and eat his flesh to survive. After telling the story, the Buddha asked the monks, "My dear friends, do you think that the couple enjoyed eating the flesh of their son?" The monks said, "No, dear teacher, it's not possible. No one can enjoy eating the flesh of their own son." The Buddha said, "When we eat, we should eat in such a way that we can preserve compassion in us. Otherwise, it will be as though we are eating the flesh of our own sons." When we eat without mindfulness, we may well be eating the flesh of our own sons or daughters. Over 40,000 children die every day because of the lack of food or the lack of nutrition. Yet in many countries in the West, people waste a tremendous amount of food. We use the cereal we grow to make alcohol and feed livestock. We want to eat chicken, pork, and beef, but in order to make a pound of meat, we have to use 10 to 20 times as much cereal. Yet the people in the world don't have enough grain, rice, or corn to eat. So when we look deeply at our piece of meat, we know that it has been made from huge amounts of grain that could have been used to save people who are dying from hunger and malnutrition. Mindfulness helps us to see things that other people cannot see. That is why before eating, we should look at our food to see whether eating it will harm our compassion or will help develop our compassion. The following meal contemplation can be very useful. Let us eat in such a way that we keep our compassion alive, reduce the suffering of living beings, preserve our planet, and reverse the process of global climate change. The second nutriment, sensory impressions. The second kind of food is sensory impressions. This kind of food isn't consumed with our mouths, but with our eyes, our ears, our noses, our bodies, and our minds. Depending on the content, consuming television, books, films, the internet, and conversations can be either healthy or toxic. Sometimes we are suffering for other reasons, and we try to escape from our suffering with even more consumption, which brings more suffering. When we are upset, so we watch the television show, and then depending on its content, we feel even more upset. Sensory consumption also includes what we hear from others. If we listen to gossip, judgment, and insult, then we are consuming these things. If what we consume fills us with irritation, anger, or craving, then it creates more irritation, violence, and suffering in the world. We can have a strategy of mindful consumption so that we can read, watch, and listen to so that what we read, watch, and listen to doesn't cause more suffering for ourselves and others. Meowing. The Buddha's example, the cow with skin disease. To illustrate how the wrong consumption of sensory impressions can lead to suffering, the Buddha used a very drastic image of a cow with practically no skin left as a result of disease, so it can easily be attacked by many kinds of microorganisms. When the cow lies down, the microorganisms from the soil come up and fix themselves onto the cow and suck its blood. When the cow is brought close to a tree or an ancient wall, the microorganisms in the bark of the tree or in the wood or stone of the wall will come out and suck the blood of the cow. The cow has no means to protect herself because her skin is so thin. In modern life, we are exposed to advertisements, violence, enticing programs, and images that try to incite our craving 24 hours a day. When we aren't mindful, we don't have the skin to protect us, and what we see and hear penetrates and assaults us. Without mindfulness, we have no means to protect ourselves, and we suffer. When we drive through the city, we are consuming, whether we want to or not. Advertisements penetrate our consciousness and the consciousness of our children, who are less able to filter these sources of toxic consumption. Living without television. Anyone who doesn't watch TV, raise your hand. It's a new wave out there. Lots of people with no TVs. It's getting better. All right, living without television. I remember one day a little boy came to Plum Village, the retreat center where I live, and he wanted to leave right away because there was no television. He believed that it wasn't possible for him to survive without television. He looked at the schedule, sitting meditation, mindful breakfast, and walking meditation, and said, "This is like a military camp." So one of the nuns said to him, "Okay, we'll bring you to the railway station to go home. But you have to wait a few hours because the next train doesn't leave until 7 p.m. Meanwhile, a group of young people came and invited him to play with them. When the time came to go to the rail station, he said, "Well, I can stay another day." And finally he stayed for 2 weeks. When the time came for him to go home, he told his mother, "Why do we have to go?" He found he could survive very well without television and had discovered that there were other things that could nourish him much better. We may feel we can't live without consuming certain sensory impressions. But if we try, if we have the space, the opportunity, and the supportive environment to consume healthy nutriments, our suffering diminishes. The third nutriment, volition. The third kind of nutriment is volition, also called aspiration or desire. Every one of us has a deep desire inside, and this desire is a nutriment. If we didn't have any desire at all, we wouldn't care about living. We wouldn't have any energy. Everyone has a true deep desire. The desire itself can be healthy or toxic and can cause well-being or suffering. When Siddhartha left his palace to become a monk, he had the desire to practice and to be enlightened in order to help people suffer less. This is a wholesome desire, a good nutriment, because this food gave him a lot of energy to overcome difficulties and succeed in his aspiration. But there are other kinds of desires, like the desire to kill or to punish, which are toxic. Compassion is a positive energy. If you are a social worker, you may want to help children in the developing world who are dying from malnutrition. If you volunteer to go and help, it means you accept living a simple life. You are able to do so because you have the strength of a wholesome desire. Each of us can look to see if we can recognize our deepest desire, whether it is healthy or not, and whether it is bringing us suffering or happiness, because that is the food that nourishes our lives. The Buddha's example, we are dragged by two strong men. To illustrate a third nutriment, the Buddha used the image of two strong men dragging a third man toward a pit of glowing embers. The young man they are dragging doesn't want to die. So the two strong men represent that kind of negative volition within us that is very strong, but that only brings us more suffering. Examples of toxic volition are the cravings for sex, fame, wealth, revenge, and causing others to suffer. If you are motivated by that kind of desire, it's as if the desire has abducted you and you are being pulled in the direction of death. The fourth nutriment, consciousness. The fourth kind of nutriment is collective consciousness. We are influenced by the ways of thinking of the people around us, and we consume the views of other people in many ways. Individual consciousness is made up of collective consciousness, and collective consciousness is made up of individual consciousness. It is our consciousness that designs our world. The Buddha's example, being stabbed 100 times. To illustrate this nutriment, the Buddha uses the example of a criminal who has been caught and is brought before the king. The king orders that the criminal is to be executed by being stabbed 100 times. But the next morning after being stabbed, the criminal doesn't die. So the king orders that at noon, the criminal be executed by being stabbed again 100 times. But still, the criminal doesn't die. So the king ordered him to be executed that evening by being stabbed 100 times more. The wounds inflicted by the collective consciousness can be as painful as those stab wounds. Taking a toxin from the environment can be like being stabbed hundreds of times. If we live in an environment where people around us are very angry, violent, and cruel, then sooner or later we'll become angry and cruel like them. This happens even if we don't want it to, because we, and especially our children, are continuously influenced and penetrated by the collective consciousness of our environment. Original fear, one source of our suffering. Why do we continue to consume toxic nutriments if they only bring us more suffering? Partly it's because we still have a lot of original fear inside of us from the time we are small children. By consuming in order to distract ourselves from that original suffering, we create more suffering. As newborns, we are very vulnerable. We knew we couldn't survive on our own. We call that original fear. There are those of us who are depressed and continue to suffer even when the present situation, everything looks all right. We have a tendency to go home to the past. We feel more comfortable in that home in the past, even if that home there is a lot of suffering. We return again and again to the past because our original suffering and fear have not been relieved. Suppose you're a boat person who has crossed the ocean and arrived safely and have been accepted into another country. You're safe, you have a job, but you've still kept a picture of the ocean you crossed as a boat person in your mind. While crossing the ocean, you could have drowned at any time or been devoured by sharks. Crossing the ocean is very risky, and hundreds of thousands of boat people have died at sea. So you still have that memory, you still have that picture in your mind. Every time you imagine that ocean, you suffer. But it is only a picture. You can drown and die in the ocean, but not in a picture. The 10 fetters that bind us. Our suffering comes primarily from our mind and how we see the world. In the Buddhist tradition, we speak of the 10 kinds of fetters that bind us and deprive us of our freedom. The Sanskrit word samyojana can be translated as knots, and these fetters are like tight knots inside us. These fetters push us to do and say things we don't want to do and say. They're very powerful. Our mindfulness, concentration, and insight must also be powerful to untie these knots. The first fetter, craving. The first fetter is craving. The danger of craving is that we believe that the object of our craving is what we really want, that it is what can truly bring us happiness. So we don't see the danger of running after the objects of our craving. But when cravings arise in us, we are no longer at peace. We're not satisfied with what we have or who we are. The teaching of the Buddha is about living happily right now in the present. But when the flame of craving is inside us, we no longer have the capacity to do that. We believe that without the object of our craving, we can't really be happy. So we lose all our peace and the capacity to be happy in the here and now. How can we undo this fetter? The Buddha used many images to illustrate craving. One is that the person who is craving is like someone holding a torch and going against the wind. The fire will burn his hand. The second image the Buddha spoke of is that of a dog chewing on a bare bone. No matter how much he chews on the bone, he will never be satisfied because on the bone there's no meat, no juice left. Nowadays the bone may be made of plastic. The object of craving is like that. It can never satisfy us. The third image is that of a hook and bait that's used to catch fish. Let's start that one again. The third image is that of a hook and bait that's used to catch fish. You throw the baited hook into the river. When the fish sees the bait, it looks so appealing that he wants to bite it. But the fish doesn't know that inside the bait there is a hook. The object of our craving is like that. The danger is hidden. Sometimes the bait is made of plastic and the fish can't even eat it. Nevertheless, it looks very appealing and the fish bites it and gets hooked. So we have to look deeply in order to see the true nature of the object of our craving. If we see it clearly, it will lose its appeal and then we will be free. That's why we need to look deeply to see the hidden dangers of the objects of our craving. The second fetter, anger. The second fetter is anger and violence. The flame of anger is as destructive as the flame of craving. When anger inhabits us, we have no peace, no capacity to be happy in the here and now. We have to practice concentration, looking deeply in order to see that our anger arises from ignorance and wrong views. Understanding the first and second noble truths, suffering and its causes, we will be able to overcome our anger and untie the knots of anger. If we feel anger arising in us, we can practice stopping and breathing in such a way that we can untie the knots of our anger. The third fetter, ignorance. The third fetter is ignorance. Ignorance means wrong view. We are confused and we don't know where to go and what to do. So from our ignorance, we do and say the wrong things. We don't know what's right and wrong, and instead of sitting with our ignorance and letting insight arise, we act out of ignorance. That is the third kind of fetter we have to undo. The fourth fetter, complexes. The fourth fetter is our complexes that cause us to spend our time and energy comparing ourselves to others. There are three complexes: superiority, inferiority, and equality. Each of these bind us, even the equality complex, because we are focused on a sense of self versus other, and we are competing and comparing ourselves with the other people. These complexes exist because we have the notion that we are a separate self. We compare that self with the other selves. That is how the three complexes arise, and they only bring suffering. The fifth fetter, doubt. The fifth fetter is doubt and suspicion. When we have suspicion or doubt in us, we are not at peace. We are not free. Our suspicion and doubt may come from our ignorance, our complexes, and our craving. Perhaps we know what is right, but we don't act on it because we are held back by our doubts and suspicion. The sixth fetter, the first view. This body is me. The sixth through the 10th fetters focus on wrong perception and wrong views that lead to our suffering. The sixth fetter is the view that this body is me, that this body is a separate self. You simply believe that you are this body. That means you think that with this disintegration of this body, you will no longer be here. You believe that before the formation of this body, you were not here. If you have this view, then you add so much unnecessary suffering to your life. If you're just popping in, my name is Asheric of Asheric Meditation, and we are reading Good Citizens by Thich, Naht, Hanh, Creating an Enlightened Society. After we're done reading here on TikTok, I'm going to upload it to YouTube so you can catch all parts of this book. Continuing on, the seventh fetter, the second view, pairs of opposites. The second view is to believe that pairs of opposites are unrelated. You believe that right is totally other than left, that there is birth and there is death, that there is inside and outside, being and non-being, and sameness and otherness. All these concepts form pairs of opposites. To be caught in them is to have wrong view. The teachings of the Buddha help us to transcend pairs of opposites in order for us to come to a view that is free from dualistic thinking. The middle way is the way of non-duality. It transcends all pairs of opposites, including being and non-being, birth and death, inside and outside, and object and subject. The eighth fetter, the third view, attachment to views. When you learn about something, you form a notion about it. This is very natural. But if you're then caught by that notion, you don't let in new information or ideas to change that notion. You cannot progress on your spiritual path. So whatever you have learned, whatever you have heard, you should be careful not to consider it to be the absolute truth. You should be able to let it go in order to arrive at a higher truth. In science, if you've discovered something and you believe it to be ultimate truth, then you won't search anymore and you're no longer a true scientist. In order to progress on our path, we have to be ready to release our view, release our understanding. It is like climbing a ladder. If you've come up to the fourth rung and you think that you're on the highest rung, then you won't climb any higher. You have to release the fourth rung in order to get the fifth. And when you've reached the fifth, you should be ready to release it in order to get to the sixth. So knowledge can be an obstacle to wisdom. If you see and understand something, be sure that it's something you'll be able to release in the future in order to get to a higher kind of truth. That is the teaching of non-attachment to views. Pardon me. The ninth fetter, the fourth view, perverted view. Suppose you believe that things happen by chance and that there's no cause and effect. That is a kind of perverted view. The law of cause and effect means that when you sow a bean seed, you will harvest beans. When you sow a seed of anger, you will harvest anger. If you're caught by the fetter of perverted view, you don't understand why things happen. They just strike you as unfair or capricious. Pardon me. Capricious? I haven't read that word out loud before. They just strike you as unfair or capricious because you don't believe in the law of cause and effect. You think that everything happens just by chance. When you're able to observe something deeply, you can see that it manifests because of many conditions coming together. Believing that there is only one cause is a perverted view. Of course, we all experience hurt, illness, and pain that we cannot control. But much of the additional suffering we experience on top of this pain is caused by perverted view. The Four Noble Truths teach us that our additional suffering often comes from a way of living that is full of wrong perceptions, wrong thinking, wrong speech, and wrong action. The 10th fetter, the fifth view, attachment to rites and rituals. When you believe that by performing a particular rite or ritual, you can experience liberation and salvation, then you're caught by rites and rituals. Perhaps you believe that you can eat every kind of meat except beef, and that eating beef will prevent your starvation. Or you believe that you can eat every kind of meat except pork, that this is the kind of taboo or percept that you can get caught in. With understanding, you can liberate yourself. It's not by performing rituals and ceremonies and observing taboos that you can become liberated. There is not one action or one ritual that will bring you liberation. Liberation requires continual practice, continual commitment to mindfulness, concentration, and insight. To illustrate this fetter, I sometimes use the example of someone bowing to the Buddha on the altar. The right practice of bowing is a kind of meditation, a way of looking deeply. That is why, before bowing to the Buddha, you should know that the Buddha is in you and you are in the Buddha. Both of you, the Buddha and you, have the nature of emptiness. This is a way of looking deeply, and it has the power of liberating us. If we don't do this and we believe that bowing to the Buddha is an act of devotion, that it will help us to be saved, we are caught in that ritual. Performing the Eucharist is the same. The priest breaks the bread and gives it to you, and he gives you the wine to drink. If, when you eat the bread and drink the wine, you are in touch with the whole cosmos, then you are not caught in the ritual, because in the piece of bread you see that the sunshine, the clouds, the earth, and everything in the whole cosmos is in the bread. When the priest performs the Eucharist, he wants you to be alive and in touch with Jesus Christ as a reality in you. To automatically perform the ritual is to be caught in the ritual. Then we don't get anything except the ritual. Real communion is possible when you are truly alive as you participate the ritual. That is what you want, not just a performance of an empty form. The same thing is true in every tradition. Walking meditation or sitting meditation can be just a ritual. Chanting can be just a ritual. We can get caught in rituals so easily, and that's one of the fetters we have to break through. If we practice wholeheartedly, not just following the rote practice, then the practice of mindfulness and insight will liberate us, and rites and rituals will become a vehicle and an opportunity to practice. Understanding the causes of ill-being leads to happiness. The second noble truth reminds us that once we have called suffering by its true name, we need to look deeply to see and gather its causes. We don't need to look to a God to tell us why people suffer. We can see the causes of suffering by using our own clear minds, our own deep insight. Only then can we move to the third noble truth, well-being and the transformation of suffering. That was the fourth part of Thich Nhat Hanh's Good Citizens, Creating an Enlightened Society. Thank you so much for joining us. Now that I'm done the fourth part, I will be logging off to upload this to YouTube. If you want to catch this whole fourth part or the 3 parts before it, you can find it all on my YouTube, Esoteric Meditation. I've got links in my bio. Our next part is going to be the 5th part, the third noble truth, but we will be back tomorrow to finish reading that part. All right, thank you guys. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'm looking forward to reading with you again. And again, we're reading Good Citizens, Creating an Enlightened Society by Thich Nhat Hanh.